The BBC is in the news once again for all the wrong reasons. This time, the charges against this publicly funded organization are pretty grave. If the reporting by the Sun newspaper is anything to go by, then the BBC has a lot to answer for. The Sun has just reported that Gary Lineker was scheduled to interview this year's Premier League Golden Boot winner Mohamed Salah as part of his last episode of the Match of the Day program. But the BBC decided to cancel the planned interview, fearing that both would discuss the ongoing genocide in Gaza. If you remember, Gary had to leave the BBC for his continuous support for the victims of the Gaza genocide. It was in this context that he had shared a video on the cancer of Zionism on his Instagram page that proved to be a reason for his ouster from the BBC. While sharing that video, he didn't notice a small emoji of a rat, which is considered to be offensive for Jews, since the Nazi Germany used rats as a symbol to dehumanize them. Gary had deleted his Instagram story as soon as he became aware of the historical context of the rat emoji and issued a public apology. But that wasn't enough for the BBC bosses, and he had to go. That's the power of the Israeli lobby these days. Gary presented his last match of the day program last week as legends paid tribute to him for his contribution to the game of football, both as a footballer and then a respected broadcaster. However, it has now emerged that the last episode of the Match of the Day show was also meant to include an exclusive interview with Liverpool Football Club's Mohamed Salah. As you know, Liverpool were crowned the Premier League champions, and Salah was given the Golden Boot for scoring the most number of goals. But according to The Sun, BBC's new director of sports, Alex Kajelski, decided to axe the interview, fearing that both Gary and Mohamed Salah would discuss the ongoing genocide in Gaza. The Sun claimed that there was no love lost between Gary and Kajelski, with the ex-England hero allegedly giving him the cold shoulder at this year's FA Cup final. The Sun quoted an insider as saying, and I quote, "The plan was for the interview to be shown across the BBC the weekend of Gary's final match of the day. That would include on Football Focus the day before, as well as online and on social media. Out of nowhere, it got cancelled. Some people think they didn't want Gary and Mo to talk about Gaza. Salah has spoken out in his support for Palestinians living in Gaza, and Gary has made his feelings clear too. It felt like it may have come up naturally in conversation. It seems they axed it rather than risk possible editorial issues. That only just overcome one storm, so to force another would have been a nightmare. End quote. In response to queries from both The Sun and the Daily Mail, the BBC said in a statement, and I quote, "The interview was cancelled because it was planned to air after Gary's last match of the day. It would be wrong to suggest anything else." End quote. So the BBC is not denying. Now, can you understand the logic behind the cancellation? The BBC is saying that it wanted to air the interview after the match of the day was broadcast. What's the logic behind it? Clearly, the BBC would have generated more viewers if it aired that interview at a time when the whole world's attention was on the English Premier League and Mohamed Salah. Now the Premier League is over and Salah has also moved on, and people are no longer talking about the Premier League or Salah or football. Would an interview with Salah now get the BBC the same numbers that it would have given had this been broadcast last week? I can understand why the BBC would be worried and develop cold feet over the prospect of Gary and Salah discussing Gaza, given that the Liverpool and Egypt star have spoken about his disgust on the Gaza genocide in the past. But one thing I don't understand as to why a national broadcast of the UK, funded by British people's tax money, would be worried how a foreign settler colony called Israel feels about its editorial decision. Wasn't Gary right when he said exactly the same thing during his interview with BBC's Amol Rajan?
Knowing what you know now, which is that the narrator of that documentary
As a child, yeah.
is a child whose father is a Hamas official, and that wasn't disclosed to the public, which amounts to a serious law in the view of the BBC, would you still sign that letter?
Yes. 13-year-old child narrating, it's been written by the people who produced the show.
But the BBC failed to do sufficient due diligence.
I don't believe they did. I think they just capitulated to
audiences
lobbying that they get a lot of lobbying.
And audiences didn't know something quite fundamental about the child, which is that he was the son of a Hamas official. Isn't that a problem?
I don't think so, no.
And so you would put the programme back on iPlayer now?
100%. I think you let people make their own minds up. We're adults. We're allowed to see things like that. I mean, it's incredibly moving.
But the argument against it is that if you are addressing an issue like Gaza, doing it through the eyes of a child almost immediately puts you on the side of Palestinians who are suffering.
Right, well...
And...
Can I be impartial? Or partial?
You could be partial.
I know where I stand on this. I'm sorry, it's more important than what the BBC, what's going on there is, the mass murder of thousands of children is probably something that we should have a little opinion on.
But the BBC as a whole needs to be impartial about it.
Why? It needs to be factual.
It needs to be impartial about a conflict, doesn't it? And it's hard...
Does it have to be... It wasn't impartial about Ukraine and Russia.
And you might say that the...
Why does it have to be impartial about... I understand if it's partial about our government and things in this country and everything like that, but something that's going on that far away, why does it...
Because the Israeli position is that what is happening in Gaza, and by the way, I'm not here as an advocate of the Israeli government, but the Israeli position is that what is happening in Gaza is a response to the slaughter and capture of innocent Israelis on October the 7th. And
which was awful, which was truly awful.
And that full context needs to be there when discussing what's going on.
But that's not the full context, is it? Because the full context starts way before October the 7th, doesn't it?
It seems the BBC has learned nothing in the last 20 months. Time and again, this once reputed media outlet has faced public shaming for its perceived biased coverage in favor of Israel. I've asked before, I'm asking now. Has the BBC made peace with the fact that it doesn't want to be treated as a reputed media organization anymore? Would it have taken the same decision? Let's say if Gary Lineker and Mohamed Salah were expected to discuss the Russia-Ukraine conflict. Is it then fair to conclude that the BBC has an agenda to support Israel on the Gaza conflict? That's it from me. Thank you very much for your support of this platform and our journalism on buymeacoffee.com and Patreon. If you too think that our journalism is worth supporting, then you too should consider becoming part of it. In the meantime, if you haven't subscribed to my channel, please do so, because that's one of the many ways you can support independent journalism. God bless you all.